A lot of anger today, a lot of regret perhaps, but also a lot of optimism, depending on who you ask. Today is a day where we get to see the nation basically cut in half. If you look at the popular vote, Clinton won. If you look at the Electoral College, Trump won by a huge majority. Now, this is, as one friend of mine pointed out, kind of within the margin of error. It's 0.03%, I think, in terms of closeness between Trump and Clinton, 0.03%, which means that is the margin of error well within the margin of error, because you have a 1% margin of error, generally speaking. And so that means that the nation is basically cut in half, at least in terms of who went out and voted. And a majority of people did not. You didn't have a very big voter turnout. You usually don't. It's about 40%, if that. So people who went out and voted, they went out and voted. And of those people who went out and voted, you have them split in half. And I guess that reflects the general feeling of America right now. We are kind of split in half in terms of how we feel about how things are going. Because half of the country feels that we should go towards a more socialistic perspective, a more socialistic stance on how we handle things. And the other half of the country wants to, I don't want to say regress, because that's a negative term, but it wants to go back to an older sort of 80s system of non-intervention and maybe an early 2000s non-intervention era. But it really wasn't non-intervention in the late 90s and early 2000s when you think about it, because when we think of non-intervention, you're probably thinking of, or deregulation would probably be the better way to put it. You have thoughts that pop up of Enron when you talk about deregulation. Everyone thinks about Enron. Whenever you talk about deregulation, you think about Enron, you think about Halliburton, you think about the oil companies. That's fair enough, but it's inaccurate. It was deregulated, yes, but it was deregulated in a sense that in a way that would benefit the bigwigs anyway. It was set in a way that would benefit the Bush family, of course, back in the day, and the rest of we would call them now ruling elite. So calling it deregulation is a little bit unfair, because it wasn't really deregulated. It was just set up so that the already established companies had a better pull. It was set up. It was very set up. Now, deregulation is something that biotech firms are very much in favor of nowadays, and Trump appears to be in favor of deregulating biotech, and pharmaceuticals will probably be doing a lot better. Stock markets didn't really do too well today, but it was more of a knee-jerk reaction. Now the Dow and the NASDAQ and the S&P 500 are all doing fine. It's, again, within margin of error because they all go up and down every day. Something that CBS just said a few seconds ago that I thought was really interesting was that it's a vote for Clinton was a return to status quo, or a continuance of status quo, which seems odd to me because the status quo before was hope and change. That was the whole thing with President Obama, was hope and change. So how is Clinton a continuance of status quo? Is the status quo hope and change? If that's the case, it's not a status quo, because a status quo cannot be changed. Status quo is what it is right now. It's a lack of change. So how can you have hope and change while also having no change whatsoever? Seems a little bit contradictory, but that explains politics, doesn't it? Well, the internet reaction to Trump's winning is kind of funny. If you go on Twitter right now, and in case you can't tell, I'm a little bit excited about it. Not because Trump won nearly as much as because other people are upset. I revel in other people's anguish. But if you look at what's happening right now with the reaction online, you have a lot of people on Twitter who are very angry. And most of those people are too young to vote, so they don't matter. But you have a lot of people on Twitter who are absolutely ecstatic, which I think is kind of funny to see on Twitter. Some of them are not even American. One friend of mine, good friend of mine, commented today that this is, Brexit happened a few months ago, and the Americans always have to upstage everyone. So now we have the equivalent of Brexit in the United States. That's fair enough. That's pretty much true. Yeah, this is the Brexit for the U.S. Brexit, of course, being Britain, the UK exiting the European Union, which has not yet happened, but is going to rather soon. They're hoping, I think January or March, they're hoping for a final vote from Parliament, because apparently the will of the people wasn't enough. A popular direct democracy is not quite enough. The people that they voted in now have to have a say in it for some reason. And that leads me to another point here. Nothing has changed really at all locally or state-wise or even nationally, except for a change in figurehead. Now, that doesn't mean that nothing's going to change. I want to make that clear right now. That doesn't mean nothing is going to change. It just means nothing has changed at the moment. Here's something interesting. Look at the election and look at who won. You don't have a regime change at all, especially in Georgia, by the way, where pretty much everyone ran unopposed. In Georgia, you had Nathan Deal unopposed. You have Tom Graves unopposed. I don't know why Nathan Deal was unopposed, by the way. Tom Graves unopposed. You have other folks in Georgia, again, unopposed. There was one office, and I, for the life of me, cannot remember which one it was now. It was not acquisitions. That's a CEO department thing, but it was I think it was public welfare department or something like that anyway. And you had one libertarian candidate who was running against a Republican. So I went ahead and voted for the libertarian because why not? It's not like it matters because everyone's going to vote for the Republican anyway. I highly doubt the libertarian candidate's going to get even 1% of the vote in this case because it's Georgia and that's how Georgias are. But the local elections have not really changed much of anything. Todd Gardenhire is still in the Tennessee Senate or Tennessee Congress. He's still there. You still have Chuck Fleischman. You still have Scott DesJarlais. Those two people are familiar names, are still in the House of Representatives. These two people are still there, and they're still going to do exactly what they were doing before. Bob Corker is still in his Senate position. That's not changed. Pretty much everything is the same here in Chattanooga and here in the state of Tennessee. So I don't understand a lot of the panic that's happened because Trump has won. Just because Trump has won does not mean that it's all over for America. It doesn't mean that everything's going to get exponentially better for America either. What it means is you have a symbol, you have a sign that people want something different, but they don't really. Because you have, again, Trump who's in office, which does represent a change in the presidency and in the federal government because you have him appointing different people. You have the Supreme Court, which is very important. You have different appointees to his cabinet, which is very important. You have various other appointees, which are very important. He could very well fire James Comey and replace him with somebody else. That would be an important move he could make. He may fire the director of the CIA and replace him with someone else. He may very well fire any person he wants and replace him with someone else who's not in an elected position. And he could do that. And this may be a positive or a negative thing, depending on who he picks. And we don't know who he's going to pick so far. We do know his picks for the Supreme Court, but that's about it. Now, something that interested me, though, was the tech sector's reaction, in particular, tech journalist reaction to the election of Donald Trump, or perhaps, better put, the potential election of Donald Trump and the sure thing that was Hillary Clinton. On The Verge, which is one of my favorite websites to go to, not because their journalism is so good, but because The Verge is just really, really biased and doesn't do anything to hide it, kind of like us, but they're really, really biased and they don't do anything at all to hide it. The Verge posted an article that was a sad Trump cake, a cake which was shaped like Donald Trump, who was sad. Very imaginative, I know. And the headline was, "This sad Trump cake exemplifies the end of Donald Trump's campaign." But it doesn't, because Trump won. And they were not anticipating that. Most people were not anticipating a Trump win. Most people were anticipating Clinton to win by a decent margin. But that's not what happened. And right now we're waiting on Mrs. Clinton, I should say, to come in and make some remarks. Right now on the television, we have a row of American flags. I'm counting about 10 American flags, and 12 actually, American flags. And we are still awaiting Ms. Clinton's response to Donald Trump's election as the president-elect of the United States. And that's another thing worth noting, by the way, is we're not really going to see much of anything out of him until January when he's finally sworn in. De facto, President Obama is still the president. That's just the case. We still have the same status that we had before up until January. So President Obama is still President Obama until the end of his term. And that's another thing that always makes me a little bit annoyed is you have this obnoxious tendency people have where people who are formerly president or senator or governor or congressman or whatever, even after their term is over, journalists and whoever will still call them president this or that, or they'll still call them senator this or that. Like, for instance, George Bush goes on the air, as an example, on Fox, and they'll still call him President Bush as a platitude, I suppose. He's not the president anymore. He hasn't been for, 10 years now, close to 10 years now. He's not been president for a long, long time. 8 years, in fact. So why do you call him President Bush? He's not President Bush anymore. And I have no problem with people giving former President Bush respect, because he does deserve respect. He's a person. You should respect other people, even if you disagree with them politically or personally. You should respect them. So I have no problem with them calling him Mr. Bush or former President Bush, I guess. But calling him President Bush, I don't get it. It's a platitude. I don't like platitudes. I don't like niceties when it comes to journalism. I have no respect for that. Funnily enough, I have no respect for platitudes and for niceties in journalism. It's Mr. this or that, and that's it. That's as far as it goes if you want to be respectful. Or former president, former senator, former governor, just to give a example, or just to give context for who they were, but they are not anymore. President Bush is no longer president, so calling him President Bush doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It's confusing and it's ridiculous, and they shouldn't do it anymore, but they do it anyway because they can do what they want. Number to call in is 423-800-8949. That's 423-800-8949 is the number to call in here at Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240 and hotnewstalkradio.com. This is Binary here on Hot News Talk Radio, and we are monitoring the local election results, and we have basically mostly more of the same. This is normally a tech show, but because the election has been such a big deal, we're mostly covering the election and the aftermath of it. It's been a very big season for us here at Hot News Talk Radio. We've gotten a lot of new viewership and a lot of new listenership, and we do thank you for joining us. And by the way, like us on Facebook. We've gotten quite a few likes just over the past few days. One thing that happened to me that's kind of an interesting anecdote, I suppose, was I was at a polling place on Hickson Pike here. Actually, technically, it's Cloverdale Road. It was the church there, Stewart Heights, and there was a bit of an incident there. While I was talking to some folks at the poll, we were setting up our camera because we were filming things for the Facebook page. And by the way, if you want to see that, go to our Facebook page and you can watch it. And David Tulis, by the way, last night put out some, and he's too humble to admit it, he put out some excellent videos, and I'm saying excellent interviews with various people who are up for election, who are waiting for the election results. He's not going to say it, but I will. He put out some excellent videos on Facebook, so make sure you go out and check those out. I know the election is over, but it's still interesting to know the perspective of people who are running for office even after the campaign is over. It's worth looking at because it's very candid. It's sort of they're sort of caught in the moment right before the election results came out. The polls were already closed, the ballots were already closed, but it's still interesting to see. So go to our Facebook page and watch those videos. They're very good. And one thing that happened to me at a polling place is I was filming and we were getting our camera set up, and right before we had the camera up, a truck crashed into a gentleman's car. His name was Tucker, and he was the president. I hope he doesn't mind me mentioning this. He's the president of the Young Republicans, college Republicans at UTC. Seemed like a pretty nice guy. And a truck crashed into his car. Now, it didn't appear to be politically motivated. In fact, he appeared to be drunk. But that was an odd thing to have happen. And we got video of that. It's up on YouTube, and it's on our Facebook page as well. We shared that. We got quite a few views out of it, and you should definitely check that out. But the headline... This is another thing, by the way. The papers are way behind the Times, and the Times literally is way behind. And this is not a dig at the people who work at the newspaper because they can't help that they work for that medium. But the paper right now, if you look at the headlines, it says that it's down to the wire, right? It's a close race, and that's the headline that got published. But by the time the papers got out in the morning, the election was already over. They didn't wait, of course, for the new president to be elected before they put out that headline. So it was a little bit late on the call there. It was or a little bit early on the call, I suppose. It was a kind of funny. But anyway, the tech journalists are reacting to the election of Donald Trump, and it's not particularly positive in their analysis. You have what Trump will mean for tech is an article that's posted here on arstechnica.com. And to be fair, they're not entirely negative. According to Ars Technica, Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump defeated Democrat Hillary Clinton. Trump will now become the 45th president, succeeding President Barack Obama. We all know that. But what does he say about broadband? What does he say about net neutrality? What does he say about things that will affect us here locally? Because anything that affects tech in a broader spectrum will affect us here locally. Net neutrality is something that affects us locally. Broadband regulation is something that affects us locally. Whether or not EPB can expand beyond its borders here in the city of Chattanooga or Hamilton County is something that affects us here locally. That's something that will affect us. So it's important to know what's happening with the FCC regulations. It's important to know what's happening in the tech sector. What we have right now is Trump's presidency could bring big changes, they say, to regulation of internet service providers, but most of the changes are difficult to predict because Trump rarely discussed telecom policy during his campaign. And you can't really expect him to, because that's a topic that's going to bore most people. But the Federal Communications Commission's net neutrality rules could be overturned or weakened if Trump still feels the same way he did back in 2014, at which point he said Obama's attack on the internet is another top-down power grab. Net neutrality is the fairness doctrine. Will target conservative media. And while I don't know if he's right about the targeting conservative media part, I believe he is right about saying that this was a top-down power grab. Back when net neutrality was still being talked about, I wrote an article that got published in the Chattanoogan about net neutrality and the fact that it would have been a travesty and was, and it would have been very negative for the tech sector. This was an attempt by the feds to regulate how you are going to buy internet service provider coverage. Now, the problem with net neutrality is one that's sort of a problem trying to solve another problem. And this is another example of what I call collated government. I just made that up. I'm calling it collated government because you have government stacking upon government, stacking upon government, stacking upon government. I call it collated government. Now, what I mean by that is you have a problem that's created by government, right? So then you have a solution, which is then created by government. And you have a solution to that solution that's created by government. Then you have another problem, another solution, another problem, another solution. And it keeps going on and on and on until you have a stack of papers that reach to the moon. And that's collated government. That's what I call it now, collated government. Now, what does that mean with net neutrality? Well, with net neutrality, you have the problem where telecoms get government assistance, and they all do. They all get government assistance. People who complain about EPB, a lot of the time perhaps don't realize that EPB is just as government as any other ISP, if not even less so, because internet service providers all receive aid from the government in one way or another in the form of tax breaks, which is essentially getting money from the people, or they get special rates on buying wire. They get special rates on buying land. They'll get special rates on anything you could ever want. Instead of having to deal with a private person, instead, the telecoms will deal with government and buy land, and will buy power lines, will buy any number of things from government. And unfortunately, this means that there's a lot of collusion. And you'll see people who are lobbyists for, just as an example, Comcast, who also happen to have a position in the FCC, or who also happen to be in the city council or in the county commission or on some planning commission or planning committee. And it all goes to pot because of that. So to solve this problem of unaffordability, which is more or less caused by government, you have a solution which is then created by government. Doesn't really make any sense, does it? So that's where the tech sector plays in with politics. The tech sector and politics are like this. I've got my fingers crossed. The tech sector and politics are together all the time. I mean, think about it. The internet itself is a creation of a partnership between government and universities, and universities are usually publicly funded. So you have a government institution creating a telecommunications network. And yes, the outcome was good. It was a straight line with a crooked stick. I'm not saying internet should never have happened or World Wide Web should never have happened, but the way it was made is not ideal. I'll put it that way. It worked out really well, but the way it was made was not to my standard of ideals, which is, take from that what you will. But the schools have the same problem. I was just talking about this with a good friend yesterday. The schools are the same problem, where you have the issue of school resource officers, in this case, they'd be sheriff's deputies, who'd be going to schools, right? And they'd be acting as, not really as a social worker, but they'd be acting as a enforcer who's going to be affecting children. The problem with this is children are not exactly trusting of deputies, or even if they are, they're not exactly willing to go up to them and talk to them on a person-to-person basis. So the alternative solution is we'll have social workers in the schools who are going to talk to kids and prevent the problem before it becomes a problem that requires the involvement of law enforcement, so a kid doesn't get thrown to the ground because he stood up at his desk. That kind of thing doesn't need to happen. So you have social workers who prevent that problem. But these are both solutions to the same problem, which is, again, created by government. We're talking about solutions within a bubble. I want to get out of that bubble of public money going towards schooling. And that is a problem. It's a bubble that we are in. I want to get out of that bubble. And people act like if you get rid of government funding for schools, schools will just disappear and children will be uneducated. If you have a phasing out period where things become privatized over time, you're not going to have that. Now, I'm not talking about immediately, yank the chain and yank the carpet out from under people. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a gradual phasing out. It can be done, and it could be done. You could do the same thing with welfare. You can do the same thing with a lot of things which are under government control. Now, your solution might be different from mine, but it could very well happen. And do I think this is going to happen because of a Trump presidency? No. Do I think this is going to be happening because local politicians want it to happen? No, because I know they don't. I don't think huge change is coming to our local area, which may be good depending on your perspective. This is Binary here on Hot News Talk Radio.
I'm blowing everything up. We're starting over. I'm doing a new show. I want guys who push it to the middle of the table and go over the top. Take a risk, fail miserably. I'm right, and I'm not wrong, and I'll never back down. Conflict works. Allow it.
It's The Herd with Colin Cowherd. Right here and everywhere. Noon Eastern.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds. We'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Is your career taking you where you want to go? If not, talk to Covenant Group Insurance, especially if you like helping people. Call and learn how you can work for yourself, but not by yourself. Intense but free training, plus a fantastic lead program, plus office support equals your success, your prosperity. Gross at least $75,000 your first year selling insurance. Call Steve or Jada for a confidential interview. That's 855-8484. Maybe the most important call you'll make all year.
A $500 gift card.
$500? What?
That's right, Bunky. A $500 gift card from a store of your choice. The agents at Exit Realty Scenic City are confident they can sell your house. They can do it in 99 days or less. If your listing proves a slowpoke, they will give you a $500 gift card. No one works harder for you than agents at Exit Realty Scenic City. Licensed in Tennessee and Georgia. Exit sells quickly all types of commercial and residential properties and vacant land. Looking for a dream home, or maybe you're just a first-time home buyer? Let an agent get you started today on your house search. If you're a real estate agent looking for a change, see what Exit can do for you. Training, technology, branding, culture, and financial freedom. Again, Exit Realty Scenic City. Call 423-551-EXIT to learn more. Call 423-551-EXIT and learn more.
Terms and restrictions may apply.
Cash, 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 and more cash. Rick Davis has the cash when you sell gold, silver, diamonds, rings, and jewelry. Sell Rick your precious metals today and lock in your price. Hey, Rick Davis will trade your cash for shiny, brilliant, and heavy gold. Gold cheaper now by $100 an ounce. Join the Rick Davis Silver Bonanza too. Prices so low, the Lone Ranger is bound to gallop in, Kimosabe.
Hey-ho, silver, away!
The markets are changing, so buy now. Cash, 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 and more cash for your silver and gold, gold, gold. Rick Davis, 5301 Brainerd Road. That's 5301 Brainerd Road. Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds. Oh, and cash, cash, cash. You know where it is.
Hey-ho, silver, away!
We're at the Cantina at Amigos Mexican Restaurant. Yes, ma'am. 2 orders of nachos with beef and beans and 2 beers. Chattanooga loves its Amigos restaurants, but the Amigos in Hickson has something extra. NCAA, the week's big game. How about a house wine? Really good. Big name beers. Just tell Maria what you want. And here at Amigos, margaritas are popular. And it's only $3 a day. If you come here on a game day, Saturday, a Natty Light is only $2.25. Here at Amigos, just during NCAA, Natty Light, $2.25. Amigos Mexican Restaurant in Hickson. The happy hour is 3 to 9 today and every day. I'd say the atmosphere is festive. Look at that huge TV. It's like being amid the fans under a bright sun, but without all the heat. Stay cool. Quench your thirst. Amigos, between the Staples and Hobby Lobby. Take the table next to mine and enjoy the great NCAA game with friend or family here at the Cantina at Amigos Mexican Restaurant. Okay, it's starting.
Listen up, y'all. Ben Phillips, Home Rate Mortgage, 805-9100. I'm in the business of saving people money. And if you want to save money, pick that cell phone up right now, 805-9100. I received a call that I won't forget. The guy is a Chattanooga police officer who served our great country in the Air Force. A true American hero. Our hero is renting, which costs too much for a space too small. We helped him achieve the American dream And the best part is this. He purchased a $180,000 home with zero down. His payment is $200 less than what his rent was. And now he has a safe place with more space to raise his family. It's easy, and you can do it too. It just takes 10 minutes and one phone call. 805-9100.
Turn a house into a home.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Hot 1240 Hot News Talk Radio with your Hot News Now update. The election results are in, and Greg Martin has defeated Joe Smith for County Commission in District 3. Wilkinson and Gardenhire had a tough battle in Hamilton County, but Cleveland was the deciding factor for Gardenhire, giving him the win. Scott Desjardins and Chuck Fleischman also winning their re-elections. In Saudi Daisy, incumbents Shipley and Adams winning the commission contest. On the presidential side, Donald Trump winning big in Hamilton County and Bradley County. Keep it tuned here for more election news. And 270 acres of woodland are still burning at Flipper Bend, Mowbray, and heavy smoke is causing air quality problems for Hamilton County, now advising that you stay inside in areas where you can smell smoke. Bulldozers are constructing fire breaks. So far, no structures have been damaged by these flames. A home in Ottawa on Tuesday caught on fire. The police call came in at 9:30 a.m. The home is a total loss. The Red Cross is assisting the family. You can make a child's Christmas wish come true by donating a toy for the Tennessee Baptist Children's Home. Stop by Chick-fil-A and check out the tree. If it's going on in the Tennessee Valley, it's going on Hot 1240 Hot News Talk Radio.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Expect more sunshine and breezy weather out there through your afternoon. High 65 to 67 tonight. Getting chilly under clear skies. Lows 38 to 41. For Thursday, beautiful. Lots of sunshine. High 68 to 70. Still pleasant, but continue dry through Friday. Come to Guthrie's, home of the original golden fried delicious chicken finger with their special world famous sauce. Open daily. Locations in Trenton, Signal Mountain, Ringgold, and now 5203 Brainerd Road. That's Guthrie's. And I'm Swargene 12 Chief Meteorologist Patrick Moore.
On AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio.
We're still waiting on Hillary Clinton to come out with her concession speech. Her remarks still not here yet. Still waiting on that. We'll give you those as soon as they come out. I've got the page pulled up here online. We're waiting for Clinton to get out here. And we now see Huma Abedin walking out to the stage along with nobody else. Someone, looks like campaign staffers and people, they're now rising to clap. Clinton is now about to make her speech. As soon as it becomes available on the net feed, we'll let you know here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240, hotnewstalkradio.com. It's been a hard and tough race for Clinton, obviously. This has been a tough race for her. She won a few of the key states, but obviously not enough. And we're still, again, waiting for remarks from her to make her concession speech, or at least to pretend to give a concession speech, perhaps. We're wondering if she's going to pull the old, I don't want to call it the race card, but we're wondering if she's going to pull any sort of remarks about race in this speech, about anything negative about Trump. We're wondering about that, or she's going to be gracious like Mr. Trump was. Still waiting again on remarks regarding Donald Trump and the concession speech by Ms. Clinton. Again, still waiting on that. Now, this is AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio and hotnewstalkradio.com, and we're talking about pro-business and what it means to be pro-business. We were talking about this a little bit ago, and pro-business can mean two things, because you can mean pro-actual business, or you can mean pro-not actual business. By that, I mean you can be pro-private and public cooperation or collusion, or you can be pro-free market. Now, I don't think Donald Trump is actually really pro-free market in a hardline way like you might be and like I am. You know, you're pro-free market, especially if you're a small business person. You don't want government to get involved in your business. You don't want government to get involved in the tech sector because government's already involved enough. Government made the internet, for the most part. The United States military did, and along with public universities, made the internet. You had CERN, the Swiss firm, which made the World Wide Web, or at least Tim Berners-Lee did. Again, that's government collusion. You have all of that. So you don't want more. You don't want more government intrusion in your livelihood. And while I think we are still going to be seeing that, especially since the local elections have proved that change is not really happening in Tennessee and it's definitely not happening in Georgia locally, we still are going to have more of the same. Now, Andy Burke is still the mayor. The mayoral race is, I think, going to be a very important one, as is the mayor or the run for sheriff. These are both going to be very important races. Jim Hammond may very well still be the sheriff, but Mayor Andy Burke is going to have a harder fight. Jim Hammond has been pretty popular with the people so far, but Mayor Andy Burke, not so much. Now, Andy Burke has said very good things about the tech sector and about private businesses, but the proof was not necessarily in the pudding, because you still had government resources going towards private businesses and allocated towards different businesses, which you might say, well, it's only fair. But it's not, because it's directed at certain businesses. It's directed at certain individuals. It's not fair in that sense. You still have, again, public and private collusion, which you should not have, but you do under this system. Now, the mayoral race is not happening yet. That's not until March, and we're waiting for March to come, which is actually not too far away now. I think the run for mayor is going to be much more important for Tennessee, or at least for Chattanooga, than the race for president, believe it or not. It is definitely more important. And even more important than that will be the race for sheriff. Now, the sheriff elections have not happened yet. I believe those also happen in March. And Jim Hammond, again, could very well still be sheriff, and that wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. Jim Hammond seems to be a good guy. We've had nothing but nice experiences with him as a company and as individuals. But it will be interesting to see if there's a difference of opinion between Sheriff Jim Hammond and Andy Burke publicly, if he's going to endorse a candidate or not. We'll have to wait and see. Will there be a law enforcement endorsement of a particular candidate? Again, we'll have to wait and see. Larry Groen right now is the outstanding opposer to Mayor Andy Burke, and the race between Larry Groen and Andy Burke is going to be a tough fought one for both sides, because a lot of people still support Mr. Burke, and a lot of people still support Mr. Groen, who has proven himself to be pretty important on the city council, especially with just recently we saw the vote for beer in movie theaters, which is a good example of, it's still regulation, but it's not as tight of a regulation, because while not being outright banned, it's at least now somewhat allowed, albeit with regulation, beer in movie theaters. Unfortunately, we're not going to be seeing that immediately. You're not going to be seeing people buying a Coors tomorrow at the theater downtown. You're not going to be seeing people buying it at Majestic 12 yet. It's going to take a while, because they have to get approved by the beer board. They have to get beer licenses, these businesses, and they'll have to get people on staff who are trained to handle how to sell alcohol to various people. And that's going to be a very tough thing to do, unfortunately. That's going to be very tough, because there's a lot of regulation on who can buy what when. And, have to wait on that. Well, we're continuing to follow the election. Tim Kaine is speaking right now about the Trump victory. I'm going to wait for Clinton to come on before we kick it over to her. And that may very well not happen during this half hour that we have. And I don't anticipate interrupting Colin Cowherd to put Hillary Clinton on the air, if even for a short period of time. But I'm sure her remarks will be on CBS and on Fox Radio News, which you'll be hearing in the next few hours. This is AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio and hotnewstalkradio.com. The local reaction to Trump's victory seems to be pretty okay, actually. By okay, I mean not negative. Trump had a huge lead in Bradley County, and a pretty close lead in Hamilton County. So right now, the lead in Tennessee has been pretty strong, and that's just to be expected. Tennessee is a very conservative state. Donald Trump also won Georgia, which surprised me, because Atlanta didn't pull through with polling through for Clinton, which I thought was interesting, but not terribly surprising, because you still have a lot of conservatives who are in Atlanta, and I guess it just proves that Atlanta is not the liberal cesspool that a lot of Georgians seem to think that it is. I went out and voted, by the way, and I got my I am a Georgia voter sticker, and I put it on my computer case, because I put all the stickers that I think are at least marginally important on my computer case. So that's where that is now. This is AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio, hotnewstalkradio.com. Again, we're waiting for Ms. Clinton to come out and make her remarks in her concession speech, and we're expecting that to happen here soon. Mrs. Clinton is walking up to the stage now on television. We're waiting for that to happen on the network stream, which should be soon. She's just about to make her remarks, and we'll bring those to you as soon as is available, which appears to be here soon. This is AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio, hotnewstalkradio.com. Make sure you go to our Facebook page, He's not going to say it, but I will. David Tulis did excellent interviews last night. Make sure you watch them. Even if you're not a fan of politics, the interviews are always interesting, and definitely check those out on our Facebook page, Hot News Talk Radio on Facebook. Again, that's Hot News Talk Radio on Facebook. We also did a live video and a shorter video of a car crash that happened at the polling place here in Northgate. And we're going to go over now to Clinton's remarks here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240, hotnewstalkradio.com.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Very rowdy group. Thank you, my friends. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so very much for being here. And I love you all, too. Last night, I congratulated Donald Trump and offered to work with him on behalf of our country. I hope that he will be a successful president for all Americans. This is not the outcome we wanted or we worked so hard for. And I'm sorry that we did not win this election for the values we share and the vision we hold for our country. But I feel pride and gratitude for this wonderful campaign that we built together. This vast, diverse, creative, unruly, energized campaign. You represent the best of America, and being your candidate has been one of the greatest honors of my life.
That's the Hillary Clinton speech, which is ongoing right now. We're going to give you the highlights of that later on CBS Radio News and on Fox Radio News, which will be not interrupting, but which will be playing at the advertisement minutes that we have here on Hot News Talk Radio. Clinton now giving her concession speech following the Trump victory. Again, we'll have full coverage of that in just a few minutes here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240, and hotnewstalkradio.com. She's speaking about how she lost, actually. She sees it as a major loss, apparently, according to the speech she just gave, or a portion of it. And Trump sees it as a major victory, that's for sure. But is it a major victory for the American people? That's the question. And it depends on who you are. That's the thing. If you are someone who is into cronyism, if you're someone who's into relying on foreign trade and foreign export, this might not be the best election for you. If you're someone who is reliant on public-private partnerships, this might not be the best election for you. But it might not be the worst either. That's the thing. Trump is not going to kill trade with China. He's not going to kill exports and imports from Mexico. What he is going to do is he's going to give a positive public perception for some people. For the middle class, most people are going to be very optimistic. A lot of people are going to be very well-feeling. It's going to have good vibes. And this follows my prediction about 2016, which is that 2016 is basically the mid-1980s all over again. It really, really is. If you look at trends, if you look at what's popular right now, you basically have a repeat of what you had 30 years ago. Think about it. You have dark times under a president who was popular when elected but became less and less popular upon the continuance of his term, which is Jimmy Carter. And you can compare him to Barack Obama, although I don't think Barack Obama is nearly as big of a tragedy that perhaps Jimmy Carter was in the eyes of the American people. But you had Jimmy Carter, and then you have someone who's basically more of the same, which literally was Jimmy Carter. And then you have people who represent a change of some sort, at least in the national figurehead of the president, which was at the time Ronald Reagan, and which is now Donald Trump. And you had a expectation that Jimmy Carter was going to beat Ronald Reagan very easily. And what do we have here in 2016? We have Donald Trump beating Clinton in a surprise victory, just like you had Ronald Reagan beating Jimmy Carter in a surprise victory. So it is more of the same from 30 years ago today. And think about 1985 socially as well. It's very similar. You have a lot of leftist movements but you also have a lot of very, very right-wing movements, which we have today. And the right-wing movements today, by the way, are nothing like what you had in the 70s and 80s. The right-wing movements that we talk about today, the alt-right, whatever, that is nothing compared to what you had in the mid-1980s and especially the late 70s. Do you remember, if you're older, you will, do you remember Soldier of Fortune magazine? That, and I love that magazine, not necessarily because I agree with everything that's in it, but because it's just so wild. Soldier of Fortune magazine represented everything that was uber conservative America back then. It was intervention in communist countries, very conservative idea back then, or at least very Republican idea back then. You had soldiers, mercenaries, very popular. You had guns, very popular. They still are today. And you had dudes with mustaches shooting people. And that's getting popular again. Tom Selleck is getting a resurgence in Blue Bloods, which he had in the 70s and 80s in Magnum P.I. It's kind of weird. The corroboration is kind of strange. So my theory on society and on politics is that 2016 is basically 1986 all over again. And that might not be the worst thing ever. It might not be. You have a massive uproar, right, that you had back in the 1970s that you're going to have now, or I should say the 1980s that you're going to have now, and we have now. In Berkeley and Oakland, you have massive protests against Donald Trump's nomination, or rather his election. I don't know what good they think that's going to do, but it's doing something in terms of society. We see that young people are upset that a different person got elected. But are you going to see massive social change like we saw in the 80s? Possibly, actually. Because music nowadays is a lot like it was in the 70s. It's very dark and gritty, and it's probably going to become more like it was in the 1980s, more so like it is now. You have that 80s and 90s resurgence that we're seeing here in the mid-2010s. And you have massive political scandal back in the 1980s like you have today in the 2010s. Iran-Contra is comparable, perhaps, not in scope, but in idea, to what you have now with the Clinton email scandal and what you have with the whole deal regarding Iran. Again, you have Iran with a treaty that was made, a pact that was made with Iran under President Obama, and you have the Iran-Contra scandal. It's all very similar. It's all very interesting, too. I'm fascinated to see what's going to happen next, because right now is not nearly as interesting as what's going to follow in the next couple of years. Huffington Post, by the way, just came out with an article a few minutes ago. President Obama is now actively handing over the reins, or working on handing over the reins, to President-elect Donald Trump. And those are words I never in a million years thought I would ever have the pleasure, perhaps, maybe, of saying. Donald Trump is the President-elect of the United States. I want to let that sink in. Donald Trump is the President-elect of the United States. Now, no matter what your political position is, it means the same thing for all of us. It means change is coming to the federal government. Now, I mean the federal government, not the local government, because locally, nothing has changed in Chattanooga for the most part, and nothing has changed in the state of Tennessee, and really nothing has changed in the state of Georgia either. Basically, everything is exactly the same as it was yesterday and the day before, in the state, in the county, and in the city. It's all basically the same. Hamilton County is the same, the city of Chattanooga is the same, and the state of Tennessee is mostly the same. Not a whole lot of changes. Todd Gardenhire still in office, despite a hard fight by Ms. Wilkinson, which was well fought, although I was not entirely on board with her. I will say that she fought well and she fought hard against Todd Gardenhire, and she won Hamilton County, but Bradley County is what killed it for her, and Todd Gardenhire is still in office. And again, we've interviewed him here on Hot News Talk Radio before, and we look forward to doing that again, just as we would with Ms. Wilkinson. If she were to come on the air, we'd be happy to have her on. It's a interesting scenario that we find ourselves in, where we have much of the same locally, but we have radical change federally. What does that mean for us? Well, locally, we are an enclave. Locally, we can be an enclave, I guess I should say. You have a Democratic mayor in Chattanooga. You have Mayor Andy Burke, who is still the mayor, which may change come March, because he's had massive scandal, as you know. I heard one person tell me that Mayor Andy Burke is the Bill Clinton of Chattanooga. Now, is that a fair statement? Possibly not. But it's one that was made by a local person. So that at least represents one portion of the local perspective on Mayor Andy Burke. Now, am I making that accusation? No. But that is something that I heard, and I thought it was very interesting. Other people don't really seem to care about the Andy Burke scandal. They don't really seem to care much at all about Andy Burke, which I thought was odd. But we still are going to have a shakeup if Larry Groen gets elected. That's going to be a regime change here in Chattanooga. The mayor matters, and the mayor matters perhaps even more than you might think, because the mayor is the person who appoints the police chief. Is Police Chief Fred Fletcher going to be out of the job once and if Larry Groen gets elected? I don't know. I can't predict that. We'll have to talk to him to find out, and we'll be happy to. Are we going to have more of the same in Chattanooga, or are we going to have maybe not a radical change, but at least a slight change in regime here in the city of Chattanooga? That's what I'm excited about, and that's what I'm looking forward to, especially looking forward to covering, because it's a lot more attainable for a local radio station to cover a mayor race than it is to cover a presidential one. I'm looking forward to covering that right here on Hot News Talk Radio, which continues to be your election source in Chattanooga. Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240, and hotnewstalkradio.com. It's not over yet. It's definitely not over yet, because you still have March coming up. You still have what's going to happen in January coming up, which is the swearing in of Donald Trump, President-elect Donald Trump, I should say. And it's going to be a major regime change federally and possibly a major regime change locally. I can't predict what's going to happen in the election, but I am very excited about it. And I want to tell you something else. I want to tell you something that's very important that needs to be known by everyone in Hamilton County. This needs to be known by everyone in Hamilton County. This needs to be known by everyone who is a resident of Chattanooga, who is a voter or not. It doesn't matter. This is something you need to know. The highest power in the county, in Hamilton County, is not Mayor Andy Burke. He's the mayor of Chattanooga, right? He doesn't have a whole lot of sway in Hamilton County proper. He is the executive of the city of Chattanooga, yes, but that's in a CEO-type position. The chair people are the people like Mayor Andy Burke. The customers, you might say, the shareholders even perhaps, are the people of Chattanooga. And that means a lot. But who's a higher power than Mayor Andy Burke? Riddle me this, Batman. Who is a higher power than Mayor Andy Burke? Well, the sheriff, believe it or not. Because after all, who's going to arrest Mayor Andy Burke if he does something wrong? And I'm not saying he has, but theoretically speaking, if there was a mayor who needed to be arrested, who would do it? Not the police chief, but the sheriff. The sheriff holds ultimate power as executive, you might say, in Hamilton County and in every county which has a sheriff, or parish if you're in Louisiana for some reason. The sheriff has the most power in position in Hamilton County or in any given county, which is why I say the run for sheriff is much more important than the run for president for us here in terms of impact in Hamilton County. Because as sheriff, let's say I get elected sheriff in Catoosa County where I live. I run against Gary Sisk next time around. And what happens? Well, let's say I decide that enforcement of recreational use of marijuana is not worth the time of the sheriff's deputies in Catoosa County. Now, the mayor can say something different, but I, as sheriff, would say it's not worth busting kids for having a gram or less. It's not worth it. So my deputies are not going to be enforcing that law because I view it both as unconstitutional and as a waste of county money. So what happens then? Well, I've made a decision executively, right? I'm sheriff and I get to make that decision. The mayor can't really do anything about it. And that's a decision that I can make because the act of non-enforcement, along with the act of law enforcement, is very important. Non-enforcement is perhaps even more important than law enforcement because there are some laws on the books that really don't need to be enforced. In fact, there are a lot of laws on the books that really don't need to be enforced. What if it came down to it and there was a policeman who becomes now meter maid because you have regulation on Airbnb and he's asked to walk a beat and asked to check on every home to make sure it's up to code for short-term rentals, vacation rentals. You've now made him a meter maid. Well, what if the police or the police chief said, you know what? We're not going to enforce that because it's nonsense. It's unenforceable. Just like speeding is essentially unenforceable for the most part. People are still speeding, and most people still speed, despite the fact you'll catch a few people. Is it worth really enforcing? Not really if nobody gets hurt, would be my answer. Not really. So non-enforcement is possibly even more important than law enforcement because non-enforcement of speeding laws, imagine if every speeding law got enforced immediately, and you were immediately ticketed by some computerized system for speeding, for going, say, 5 miles over the speed limit, which everybody does, unless you're, 95 years old, in which case, bless you, but you're going way too slow. Everyone goes faster than 5 miles per hour over the speed limit, I should say. So what if that was enforced? You'd have a lot of really angry people. You'd have a majority of the city of Chattanooga, which was very angry. So non-enforcement of these laws is actually very important, and even important for commerce. Because if you arrested or pulled over every single person who was going over the speed limit, you'd have chaos. So non-enforcement is very important. And I would say, again, more important than law enforcement. It's an interesting perspective. I know it's a little bit different. It's a little bit out there. It's a little bit crazy, but it's true. I believe. I fully believe it's true that not enforcing most laws is a good thing, because most laws, if they were enforced, would mean a lot of people who didn't even know they did something wrong and didn't biblically going to jail or being fined or what have you. I mean, what if grandma collects rainwater to water her plants? She gets fined. So don't enforce these ridiculous regulations. Don't enforce these codes. Don't enforce these ridiculous laws. Just knock it off. And in fact, quit passing laws. Quit passing regulations. Quit posting code. Knock it off. This is Binary here on Hot News Talk Radio. Colin Cowherd coming up next.